of 16 well drilling projects, constructed utilizing the applied for drilling methods with a licensed driller in good standing and documentation of 16 well drilling projects, constructed by the applicant under the supervision of a licensed well driller in good standing. 3.2.44. A copy of the well log for each well constructed must be provided. The documentation must also show the applicant's experience with each type of drilling rig to be listed on the license. Acceptable documentation will include registration with the Division of Water Rights, letters from licensed well drillers from Utah or other states, or a water well drilling license granted by another state. 3.2.4.5%. Successful completion of training or education pertaining to well drilling, geology, map reading and other related subjects may be substituted for up to, but not exceeding, 25% of the required drilling experience, and for up to, but not exceeding 25% of the required drilled wells or well drilling projects. The state engineer will determine the number of months of drilling experience and the number of drilled wells that will be credited for the classroom study. 3.2.4.6. A limited or restricted license can be obtained in subcategories of activity, including well cleaning, well renovation, well abandonment, and well development or testing. Testing requirements for these license subcategories will be reduced or limited in accordance with the level of activity. 3.2.5. File a well driller bond in the sum of $5,000 with the Division of Water Rights payable to the state engineer. The well driller bond must be filed under the conditions and criteria described in subsection R 655.4.3. 3.2.6. Obtain a score of at least 70% on each of the written licensing examinations required and administered by the state engineer. The required examinations test the applicant's knowledge of A. Rule R 655.4 and Utah water law as it pertains to underground water. B. The minimum construction standards established by the state engineer for water well construction. C. Geologic formations and proper names used in describing underground material types. D. Reading maps and locating points from descriptions based on section, township, and range. E. Groundwater geology and the occurrence and movement of groundwater. F. The proper operating procedures and construction methods associated with the various types of water well drilling rigs. A separate test is required for each type of water well drilling rig to be listed on the license. 3.2.7. Demonstrate proficiency in resolving problem situations that might be encountered during the construction of a water well by passing an oral examination administered by the state engineer. R 655.4.3. Licenses and registrations. 3.3. Drill rig operator's registration. A registered drill rig operator can oversee a site where regulated well activity is taking place if a licensed driller is not on site. A registered drill rig operator must always be affiliated with a licensed driller. An applicant must meet the following requirements to become registered as a drill rig operator. 3.3.1. Applicants must be 18 years of age or older and be a citizen of the United States, or be lawfully entitled to remain and work in the United States, in accordance with Section 63G to 11-104. Applicants must file a division lawful presence affidavit with the operator application. 3.3.2. Complete and submit the application form provided by the state engineer. 3.3.3%. Pay the application fee approved by the state legislature. 3.3.4. Provide documentation of at least 6 months of water well drilling experience with a licensed driller in good standing. The documentation must show the applicant's experience with each type of drilling rig to be listed on the registration. Acceptable documentation will include letters from licensed well drillers or registration as an operator in another state. 3.3.5. Obtain a score of at least 80% on a written examination of the minimum construction standards established by the state engineer for water well construction. The test will be provided to the licensed well driller by the state engineer. The licensed well driller will administer the test to the prospective operator and return it to the state engineer for scoring. 3.4. Pump installer's license. A Utah pump installer's license allows an individual to perform regulated pump activity, including pump removal, installation, and repair in water wells and other regulated wells. A licensed pump installer can also clean, develop, pump test, and disinfect a regulated well. An individual, which does not include entities such as businesses, corporations, governments, water systems, and municipalities, can perform pump installation and repair work on their own well on their own property without obtaining a pump installer's license. An applicant must meet the following requirements to become licensed as a Utah pump installer. 3.4.1. Applicants must be 21 years of age or older and be a citizen of the United States, or be lawfully entitled to remain and work in the United States in accordance with Section 63G 11-104. Applicants must file a division lawful presence affidavit with the license application. 3.4.2. Complete and submit the application form provided by the state engineer. 3.4.3%. Pay the application fee approved by the state legislature. 3.4.4. Provide documentation of experience of at least 2 years of full-time water well pump installation and repair experience with a driller or pump installer in good standing. R 655-4-3. R 650. Licenses and registrations. 3.4.4.4. The documentation must show the applicant's experience with each type of pump rig to be listed on the license. Acceptable documentation will include registration with the Division of Water Rights, reference letters from licensed well drillers or pump installers from Utah or other states, or a license granted by another state. 3.4.4.5. Successful completion of training or education in pump installation or repair and other related subjects may be substituted for up to, but not exceeding, 25% of the required pump experience. The state engineer will determine the number of months of drilling experience that will be credited for the classroom study. 3.4.5%. File a pump installer bond in the sum of $5,000 with the Division of Water Rights payable to the state engineer. The bond must be filed under the conditions and criteria described in subsection R 655.4.3. 3.4.6. Obtain a score of at least 70% on each of the written licensing examinations required and administered by the state engineer. The required examinations test the applicant's knowledge of A. Rule R 655.4 and Utah water law as it pertains to underground water. B. The minimum construction standards established by the state engineer pertaining to pump installation and repair. C. Groundwater protection procedures and standards applicable to pump installation and repair work on wells. D. The proper operating procedures and methods associated with pump installation and repair. 3.4.7 Demonstrate proficiency in resolving problem situations that might be encountered during pump installation and repair of a water well by passing an oral examination administered by the state engineer. 3.5 Pump rig operators registration. A registered pump rig operator can oversee a site where regulated pump activity is taking place if a licensed pump installer is not on site. A registered pump rig operator must always be affiliated with a licensed pump installer. An applicant must meet the following requirements to become registered as a pump rig operator. 3.5.1 Applicants must be 18 years of age or older and be a citizen of the United States or be lawfully entitled to remain and work in the United States in accordance with Section 63GG 11 to 104. Applicants must file a division lawful presence affidavit with the license application. 3.5.2% and submit the application form provided by the state engineer. 3.5.3% pay the application fee approved by the state legislature. 3.5.4% provide documentation of at least 6 months of pump installation and repair experience with a licensed driller or pump installer in good standing. Acceptable documentation will include letters from licensed well drillers or licenses and registrations. Registration as an operator in another state. 3.5.5 Obtain a score of at least 80% on a written examination of the minimum construction standards established by the state engineer for pump installation and repair. The test will be provided to the licensed pump installer or well driller by the state engineer. The licensed pump installer or well driller will administer the test to the prospective operator and return it to the state engineer for scoring. 3.6 Shallow water well constructor's license. A shallow water well constructor's license is a combined category of a well driller's license and pump installer's license. A shallow water well constructor's license allows an individual to perform regulated well and pump activity on water production wells that are at depths of 30 feet or less, including drilling, construction, deepening, repairing, renovating, cleaning, development, testing, pump work, disinfection, and abandonment of shallow water wells. An applicant must meet the following requirements to become licensed as a shallow water well constructor. Point 1 Applicants must be 18 years of age or older and be a citizen of the United States or be lawfully entitled to remain and work in the United States in accordance with Section 63G 11-104. Applicants must file a division lawful presence affidavit with a license application. 3.6.2 Complete and submit the application form provided by the state engineer. 3.6.3% pay the application fee approved by the state legislature. 3.6.4% provide documentation of experience constructing shallow water wells. 3.6.6 Obtain a score of at least 70% on the written licensing examination required and administered by the state engineer. The required examination tests the applicant's knowledge of A. Rule R 655-4 and Utah water law as it pertains to underground water. B. The minimum construction standards established by the state engineer for shallow water well construction. 3.7% Conditional, restricted, or limited licenses. The state engineer may issue a restricted, conditional, or limited license to an applicant based on drilling experience. 3.8% Refusal to issue a license or registration. The state engineer may, upon investigation and after a hearing, refuse to issue a license or a registration to an applicant if it appears the applicant has not had sufficient training or experience to qualify as a competent well driller, pump installer, or operator. R. 655-4-3. R. 650 Licenses and registrations. 3.9 Falsified applications. The state engineer may, upon investigation and after a hearing, revoke a license or a registration in accordance with subsection R 655-4-5 if it is determined that the original application contained false or misleading information. 3.10 Well driller pump installer bond. 3.101 General 3.10.1.1 To become licensed and to continue licensure, well drillers and pump installers must file a bond in the form of a surety bond or cash bond, approved by the state engineer, in the sum of $5,000 with the Division of Water Rights, on a form provided by the division, which is conditioned upon proper compliance with the law and this rule, and which is effective for the licensing period in which the license is to be issued. The bond shall stipulate the oblige as the office of the state engineer. The bond is penal in nature and is designed to ensure compliance by the licensed well driller or pump installer to protect the groundwater resource, the environment, and public health and safety. The bond may only be exacted by the state engineer for the purposes of investigating, repairing, or abandoning wells in accordance with this rule. No other person or entity may initiate a claim against the bond. Lack of a current and valid bond shall be deemed sufficient grounds for denial or discontinuation of a driller's or pump installer's license. The well driller or pump installer bond may consist of a surety bond or a cash bond. 3.10.1.2 Bonding is not required for a shallow water well constructor's license. 3.10.2 Surety bonds. 3.10.2.1 The licensee and a surety company or corporation authorized to do business in the state of Utah as surety shall bind themselves and their successors and assigns jointly and severally to the state engineer for the use and benefit of the public in full penal sum of $5,000. The surety bond shall specifically cover the licensee's compliance with Rule R 655-4. Forfeiture of the surety bond shall be predicated upon a failure to drill, construct, repair, renovate, deepen, clean, develop, test, disinfect, perform pump work, or abandon a regulated well in accordance with this rule. The bond shall be made payable to the Utah State Engineer upon forfeiture. The surety bond must be effective and exactable in the state of Utah. 310.2.2 The bond and any subsequent renewal certificate shall specifically identify the licensed individual covered by the bond. Company names may be included on the bond, but the licensed driller name must be included. The licensee shall notify the state engineer of any change in the amount or status of the bond. The licensee shall notify the state engineer of any cancellation or change at least 30 days from the effective date of such cancellation or change. From to the expiration of the 30-day notice of cancellation, the licensee shall deliver to the state engineer a replacement surety bond or transfer to a cash bond. If such a bond is not delivered, R 655-4-3. Licenses and registrations. All activities covered by the license and bond shall cease at the expiration of the 30-day period. Termination shall not relieve the licensee or surety of any liability for incidences that occurred during the time the bond was in force. 310.2.3. Before the bond is forfeited by the licensee and exacted by the state engineer, the licensee shall have the option of resolving the non-compliance to standard either by personally doing the work or by paying to have another licensed driller do the work. If the licensee chooses not to resolve the problem that resulted in non-compliance, the entire bond amount of $5,000 shall be forfeited by the surety and expended by the state engineer to investigate, repair, or abandon the wells in accordance with Rule R 655-4. Any excess therefrom shall be retained by the state engineer and expended for investigating, repairing, or abandoning wells in accordance with this rule. All claims initiated by the state engineer against the surety bond will be made in writing. 310.2.4. The bond of a surety company that has failed, refused, or unduly delayed to pay, in full, on a forfeited bond is not approvable. 3.10.3% Cash bonds. 3.10.3.1. The requirements for the well driller or pump installer bond may alternatively be satisfied by a cash bond in the form of a certificate of deposit for the amount of $5,000 issued by a federally insured bank or credit union with an office in Utah. The cash bond must be in the form of a CD. Cash, savings accounts, checking accounts, or letters of credit are not acceptable cash bonds. The CD shall specifically identify the licensed individual covered by that fund. The CD shall be automatically renewable and fully assignable to the state engineer. CD shall state on its face that it is automatically renewable. 310.3.2. The cash bond shall specifically cover the licensee's compliance with well drilling requirements found in Rule R 655-4. The CD shall be made payable or assigned to the state engineer and placed in the possession of the state engineer. If assigned, the state engineer shall require the bank or credit union issuing the CD to waive all rights of set-off or liens against those CD. The CD, if a negotiable instrument, shall be placed in the state engineer's possession. If the CD is not a negotiable instrument, the CD and a withdrawal receipt endorsed by the licensee shall be placed in the state engineer's possession. 310.3.3. The licensee shall submit CDs in such a manner that will allow the state engineer to liquidate the CD prior to maturity upon forfeiture for the full amount without penalty to the state engineer. Any interest accruing on a CD shall be for the benefit of the licensee. 310.3.4. The period of liability for a cash bond is 5 years after the expiration, suspension, or revocation of the license. The cash bond will be held by the state engineer until the 5-year period is over, then it will be relinquished to the licensed driller. If a cash bond is replaced by a surety bond, the period of liability during licenses and registrations, which time the cash bond will be held by the state engineer, shall be 5 years from the date the new surety bond becomes effective. 310.4 Exacting a well driller or pump installer bond. 3.10.4.1. If the state engineer determines, following an investigation and a hearing in accordance with the process defined in sections R 655.4.5, R 655.4.6, and R 655.4.7, that the licensee has failed to comply with Rule R 655.4 and refused to remedy the non-compliance, the state engineer may suspend or revoke a license and fully exact the well driller bond and deposit the money as a non-lapsing dedicated credit. 3.10.4.2. The state engineer may expend the funds derived from the bond to investigate or correct any deficiencies which could adversely affect the public interest resulting from non-compliance with this rule by any well driller or pump installer. 3.10.4.3. The state engineer shall send written notification by certified mail, return receipt requested, to the licensee and the surety on the bond, if applicable, informing them of the determination to exact the well driller bond. The state engineer's decision regarding the non-compliance will be attached to the notification, which will provide facts and justification for bond exaction. In the case of a surety bond exaction, the surety company will then forfeit the total bond amount to the state engineer. In the case of a cash bond, the state engineer will cash out the CD. The exacted well driller bond funds may then be used by the state engineer to cover the costs of well investigation, repair, or abandonment. R 655.4.3. Administrative requirements and general procedures. 4.1 Authorization to drill or conduct regulated activity. The well driller and shallow well constructor shall make certain that a valid authorization or approval to drill exists before engaging in regulated well drilling activity. Authorization to drill shall consist of a valid start card based on any of the approvals listed in this subsection. Items 4.1.1 through 4.1.2 allow the applicant to contract with a well driller to drill, construct, deepen, replace, repair, renovate, or abandon exactly one well at each location listed on the start card or approval form. The drilling of multiple borings or wells at an approved location or point of diversion is not allowed without authorization from the state engineer's office. Most start cards list the date when the authorization to drill expires. If the expiration date has passed, the start card and authorization to engage in regulated drilling activity is no longer valid. If there is no expiration date on the start card, the driller must contact the state engineer's office to determine if the authorization to drill is still valid. When the work is completed, the permission to drill is terminated. Pre-authorization or pre-approval of pump installation or repair work, well cleaning, development, testing, and disinfection is not required. A well renovation permit is required if an existing well is to be modified by activities such as deepening, casing seal gravel pack repair or renovation, liner installation, pitless adapter or unit installation, casing perforating, and screen installation. A well renovation permit is not required if the well is not modified by activities such as cleaning, development, testing, disinfection, and pump work. 4.1.1 An approved application to appropriate. 4.1.2 A provisional well approval letter, also known as a rush letter approval. An approved provisional well letter grants authority to drill, but allows only enough water to be diverted to determine the characteristics of an aquifer, or the existence of a usable groundwater source. 4.1.3 An approved permanent change application. 4.1.4 An approved exchange application. 4.1.5 An approved temporary change application. 4.1.6 An approved application to renovate or deepen an existing well. 4.1.7 An approved application to replace an existing well. 4.1.8 An approved monitor well letter. An approved monitor well letter grants authority to drill but allows only enough water to be diverted to monitor groundwater. 4.1.9 An approved heat exchange well letter. 4.110 An approved cathodic protection well letter. 4.111 An approved non-production well construction application. 4.1.12 Any letter or document from the state engineer directing or authorizing a well to be drilled or work to be done on a well. 655.4.4 4.2 Start cards. 4.2.1 Before commencing work to drill, construct, deepen, replace, repair, renovate, clean, or develop any well governed by this rule, the well driller or shallow well constructor must notify the state engineer of that intention by sending the information on the start card to the state engineer by the online start card submittal system, telephone, by fax, by hand delivery, or by email, with completed start card scanned and attached. If using the telephone, leaving a voicemail is an acceptable notification. Thereafter, a completed original start card must be sent to the state engineer by the licensee after it has been telephoned in, including voicemail. A start card does not need to be sent to the state engineer by the licensee after it has been submitted online, faxed, or emailed. A copy of the start card should be kept at the drill site at all times regulated activity is being conducted.